It changes your worldview because you can't unsee what you see. It gives you another perspective on virtually everything. So you can't undo the knowledge.
Right.
You know, and you wouldn't want to. I mean, I don't know anyone who's had a serious psychedelic experience who would want to undo what they learned.
Do you ever worry that when you've tested these 87 drugs? 82 drugs, that any of them have had a long-lasting effect on your brain or perhaps change? Yeah, I remember you said at the start that you went to try ayahuasca because it can change your worldview or whatever. But what if it changes your worldview for the worse?
It changes your worldview, not because it rewires your anything physical, biophysical, or physiological.
Okay.
It changes your worldview because you can't unsee what you see. It gives you another perspective on virtually everything. So you can't undo the knowledge.
Right.
You know, and you wouldn't want to. I mean, I don't know anyone who's had a serious psychedelic experience who would want to undo what they learned. They might have had a bad experience and not enjoyed it while they were doing it, but they wouldn't undo the fact that they'd done it and they now have a different perspective on themselves or whatever it was.
What are you learning and where are you learning it from? Is someone sitting there like one of these shamans telling you stuff, or is your brain going?
Your brain's doing it. You're sort of I mean, let's not take something as drastic as ayahuasca. Let's take LSD.
Yeah.
Which you may well have had.
I haven't.
You haven't?
No.
Have you?
What is LSD? No, but like, as in, is that acid? Is that the same thing?
Yes.
Okay.
I've never taken a hallucinogenic.
Right. Okay. One of the things LSD does is it changes the inputs from your sensory organs. It makes colours brighter. It makes sound more distinct.
Right.
Like people like music when they're high.
Yeah.
It makes your sensory organs sort of, you can feel better, you know. And because you sort of, and if you have a reasonably high dose, you know, everything sort of, but you've still got your marbles.
Okay.
You know, that's the thing about it. You're not sort of lost in this. It's like you're exploring, you know, Wonderland.
Right.
You know, it's like you're in a completely, but you can still know, again, depending on the dose, but you still know that's a car, that's the road, that's the path. And you can get lost in nature and you can just appreciate the wonder of it. And that triggers all sorts of thoughts about, you know, my God, you know, this is just a construct from your sensory organs. And your mind wanders into sort of questions of being. I mean, this is how people get sort of spiritual in a non-sort of religious sense.
Yeah.
They start to, you know, it takes your thought processes into, well, actually, the really important things in my life are understanding why I'm here, understanding what this is.
Yeah.
You know, nobody, you know, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what, you know, what your job is or what you do. It's an understanding of what you are and how this came to be and, you know, how time works.
Right.
You kind of speed time up, kind of slow time down.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things I looked at was when you get older, you notice, and this is everybody, and this will be you when you're older, you notice that, you know, time speeds up as you get older.
Yeah.
You know, when you're a kid, the summer lasts forever.
Yeah.
You know.
Is that because when you're a kid, say you go from year 2 to year 3, a year is a third of your life, 33% of your life, whereas if you go 79 to 80, it's what? That's just roughly 1% of your life.
Yeah, but how does that going deeper than that?
Yeah.
What's interesting when you're 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 is that you're constantly being subjected to novel experiences, new things that you've never encountered before.
Yeah, right.
Right?
Yeah.
When you're older, everything, I've seen it before, everything's habitual. And the way your memory, the way you retrospectively look at time is your sort of signpost, if you like, the sort of if you have a long period of habit and you look back on it, it's passed really quickly.
Yeah.
if you have sort of, say, things you've never done before liberally dotted throughout, like timestamps through novel experiences, because you're basically a pattern recognition engine, that's how your brain works, and you're adjusting the patterns with new experiences, that puts that there, and that puts that there, that puts us there. My last 10 years have passed more slowly than any other decade apart from my first 2.
Really?
And that's because I've exposed myself to novel conscious experiences with that, novel places and experiences with that I've never done before. So when I look back for 2 or 3 years, 3 years ago seems ages ago. Right. Whereas before I started this, I'd look back and say, 10 years seemed like 2 minutes ago.
Yeah.
And that's because I've been disrupting the patterns that have been printed on my psyche. Right. Particularly during vulnerability imprint periods of my life. Okay. Because when you're young, you're very vulnerable to imprinting patterns on your psyche. And that's why it goes more slowly, and that's how you frame your worldview and your reality.
So is that just with substances then, or if somebody was like a adventurer and they went to all these different countries and did all these things sober,
just as well,
would that work just as well?
Just as well, because it's all about novelty, patterns that are, this is how optical illusions work. I can show you a picture, and you will see one thing and you will see another. Yeah. I've got an example, actually. If you can tell me which camera to do a little test on that one. Right, I've got this in there. There's one. You have a look at that. Don't say anything. Yeah. Right, you're going to decide what that is. You folks at home... Right, you see a pattern there. Now, 50% of the population see one thing and then 50% see another. It's either a...
duck.
Or a...
rabbit.
Yeah. Right. That's because you have had different patterns imprinted on your psyche over the years. And the pattern that matches... your current pattern set matches... a rabbit more than a duck. Right. Yours matches a duck more than a rabbit. Right. And that's how you go through. There's a book by somebody called Robert Anton Wilson that talks about this. Okay. And it also talks about drugs. Yeah. And it's a fantastic book. And how during the course of your life, changes happen to your conscious experience of life, and that certain parts of your life are particularly vulnerable to having patterns imprinted upon them. Right. Now, the relationship to time, I mean, that's just how it works. And hopefully I've demonstrated. It works with sound. I can play you a sound and you will hear different things.
You're like Yanni and Laurel, is that one?
It's like chants sometime on a football match. Yeah. Yeah. Or you can prove that you can play a chant to a football crowd. Yeah. And they'll hear, some abusive chant to somebody. Or you can play it in a theatre and they'll hear something about whatever context the play or film that they're seeing is about. Right. So it works with all the sensory organs, and that's how you construct your reality based upon patterns. Right. So these patterns, this psyche of bank of patterns is absolutely fundamental to who you are and what you see in the world. So it's hardly surprising, therefore, that when you go through life in your time and you suddenly realise that everything, your time experience retrospectively is relative to these timestamps based upon disruption of your patterns. Yeah. That you can actually do something about this if you're older. And I started doing this early on in the book. I realised this was happening. Yeah. I thought, well, I'm going to really benefit from this because the next 10 years are going to go really slowly for me.
And ultimately, the thing you're doing is trying new things constantly.
Totally novel experiences that you've, as novel as you can get, that you've never experienced again. Not constantly. You need to rest between 2 or 3 months.
Consistently.
Typically. Yeah. Do something completely radical that's going to, you've never seen or experienced before. Come back, let it sink in, do it again, and then you'll be surprised. It's not too many years before you're thinking, my God, it seems ages since I did the first one. Right. Christ, it's only 3 years, rather than, oh God, the last 10 years have gone so fast, where did it go?
Right.
Based on that, would you then always prefer to try a new drug than going back to one you've done before?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is what made one of the things that made that so interesting.
Yeah.
Because I knew a lot of the drugs I tried were going to be, make me feel and imagine and sense and just have a completely different novel experience to anything I'd ever had before. And therefore, I'd look back on it and remember it, and it would make the time go more slowly.
Do you ever find that they always say the phrase chasing the high? Have you ever found you've tried to do that with certain drugs, or is it, or even life in general?
It's difficult to do that because your first high is always likely to be the best high.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
from that specific drug. First time you do that.
Yeah, that's what I found. Unless you're having a really small doses on them, and I didn't. I tried to have pretty decent doses, but you tend to find that the next high isn't quite where the first one. It can still be great.
Yeah.
Is that just because it's the first ever experience of it, so it's new?
Partly because it's something to do with it going and disrupting your patterns on your psyche, and therefore it's less stimulation from the second experience.
Right.
But there's something tolerance can be long term. I mean, there's the problem is a stimulant is a stimulant.
Yeah.
And if a new stimulant came out, it probably wouldn't be that novel.
Yeah.
Given that, if you've had amphetamine, methamphetamine, cocaine, and mephedrone, it's less novel.
Yeah.
Is there any one drug you go back to for pleasure regularly?
It depends where I am.
Right.
I always have a lot of cannabis when I'm in a cannabis country.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I like LSD.
Yeah.
And I quite I do like stimulants.
Yeah.
When you talk about like stimulants as a category, and you've just named 4 different drugs, meth, cocaine and stuff, does that mean they all have fairly similar feelings?
They're not identical by any stretch of the imagination.
Right.
I think, amphetamine typically has more of a sort of buzz to it rather than a clarity.
Right.
Whereas cocaine will have a more clarity, it's shorter acting.
Yeah.
Mephedrone, MCAT, you probably know it as, that has a sexual payload as well. They all do, the stimulants, but mephedrone tends to have a bit of an empathogenetic effect and a bit of a chemsex payload. So they're all slightly different, but they're all stimulants at the end of the day.